Hey guys, it's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of our Meathead Monday Tips. And over the next few episodes, we're going to be discussing mobility specifically. We're going to go over some specific routines that I utilize personally, pre-squat, pre-bench press, and pre-deadlift. And if you're familiar with, if you've been to any of our seminars, if you or you've just been like a long-time fan, you know that I'm really big on having a proper warm-up and just preparing before we actually get onto the bar. You could certainly, there are certainly certain days where you're going to need to spend a little bit more time on the warm-up, other days where you're going to need to spend a little bit less time. But in general, your warm-up, before you actually get onto the bar itself, probably should take you somewhere between 7 to 15 minutes. Me personally, I'm on a weight loss journey right now. If you've been following along with what I've been doing, I've been as heavy as 340 pounds. I've been sitting around like 215. So I'm doing a little bit of extra leg work as far as in terms of recovery. And preparation, just to kind of make sure my body is healthy. So there's going to be periods of time where you spend a little bit more, a little bit less time. So I just want to kind of preface these videos, and these warm-ups are kind of something I kind of designed for myself. I don't do every single exercise, every single workout, but in general, I'm going to have some certain movements and certain kind of exercises that I like to do before I squat, before I bench press, and before I deadlift. In any type of powerlifting training program, I believe that you should hit 6 key areas. And again, so if you've been to our seminars, you probably heard me say this before. But there's big 3 criteria for mobility, and then there's big 3 criteria for stability. And when you talk about stability, that's more of like what we'd consider activation. And when we say mobility, that's more of like your quote-unquote traditional kind of stretching, where we're trying to get in a better range of motion. So you want to think about, typically for men are going to need to spend more time on mobility that are a little bit tighter, and usually the women are going to need to spend a little bit more time on activation. If you're someone newer, you may need to spend time on both if you're weaker and tight, or quote-unquote tight. So it just kind of depends on what you're going to do. So if you don't have access to some of the equipment that I'm using, some of it's very basic, but I think everyone should have at least some sort of bands. We get these from EliteFTS.com, usually a mini band, maybe a light band or a monster mini for some exercises, but in general, a mini band is going to serve you well for most exercises. And some sort of hip circle, like the medium. This is like a grippy hip circle. This is a good medium tension. It's going to serve you well for most exercises. So I think like a medium kind of tension hip circle, like they have the hip circle sport, which is on the lower end, and then they have the big ass hip circle and like the red hip circle. The grippy hip circle is kind of in between tension. Mini band's kind of, again, modest tension as well. So I think these 2 things are very good for warm-up. If you have a foam roller for soft tissue work, I think this is good. And just a quick note on soft tissue work, it's not necessarily breaking adhesions down, things like that, but I do think it's doing something for your nervous system, and it could allow you to access a little bit more of a range that's going to be pain-free in my anecdotal experience and our athletes' experience. So we're not actually breaking down scar tissue or anything like that, but I do think some type of soft tissue work can be beneficial. If you don't have a foam roller, you can get a lacrosse ball for $1. So I would at least recommend that. So you could certainly do these drills without the equipment, but these are kind of like the things that I like to use. If I had to pick one or the other, the soft tissue, you could obviously just use a barbell, for like kind of quote-unquote body temper and things like that. Lacrosse balls are $1, so I think everyone should have a lacrosse ball in their gym bag, and I believe everyone should have a hip circle and a band. These are cheap. Invest in yourself. It's really not a big deal. I don't think you need to necessarily carry a foam roller with you, and a lot of gyms honestly have them already. So definitely purchase a hip circle. You can go to markbellslingshot.com. I don't get any affiliates, commission or anything like that. Just we believe in his products, and EliteFTS.com as well for the bands is good. So that's kind of the equipment that you'll potentially need. You certainly can do warm-ups without the bands or the hip circle, but you'll see like why there's a benefit to them. Going back to the keys, we want to make sure we work on mobility for the ankles, the hips, and the thoracic spine. Those are going to be the areas that are generally tight, and generally the areas that we're going to need some more mobility in order to get into proper positions for the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. Specifically, hip mobility is where we're going to spend the most time. If you are like a close stance squatter, or a feet like kind of way back, feet flat and tucked bencher, and a conventional deadlifter, then you're going to probably need to spend a little bit more on ankles than the average person. If you're like a sumo deadlifter and like a wide stance squatter with the flat shoes that sits back more, you don't need as much ankle mobility, but still good to have some excess range. In the thoracic spine, like the kind of the general shoulder area, depending on If you're squatting more hands out or hands in, you may need more to work on more quote unquote shoulder mobility. If you have trouble kind of getting to, to the bottom of the bench press, we might need to work on more, either external or internal rotation, that sort of thing. And then obviously, like for the deadlift, you don't really need that much upper body mobility per se, but you do need some upper back extension to kind of maintain that neutral spine. So that's going to be what we're going to work on in terms of mobility. In terms of stability or activation type training, obviously your muscles are always active, but we want to potentiate, we want to stimulate, we want to make sure those muscles are firing on all cylinders, and we could just practice the skill of tensioning those muscles. In general, our three key areas are going to be, we want to activate all the muscles in our hips, the glutes and the hips, kind of your abductors, external rotators specifically. If you're a sumo deadlifter or a wide stance squatter, the more external rotation and abduction you need. If you are a conventional deadlifter or a narrow stance squatter, you don't need as much external rotation type drills, but you will always need some sort of hip extension drills. The glutes are going to be very important for that. And the glutes in general, also making sure that we have a good relationship between our ribcage and pelvis to make sure our spine is held in position. It's not just about the abs, it's about our hip muscles as well. Obviously the core, the whole trunk in here, so our abdominals, we want to work on our breathing muscles, our bracing muscles, or obliques, or rectus abdominis. All the muscles in our trunk are going to help stabilize the spine. They're going to help resist the spine from extending, resist the spine from rotating, and to resist the spine from side bending. Especially if you're a walked out lifter, the rotation and side bending becomes more of an issue. So I don't do too much of that type of training, but if you are, like I said, a walked out lifter, having those anti-rotational type drills, I think can be very efficient and beneficial to kind of work on a more stable walkout. So something to consider. Lastly, the upper back and the lats is going to help kind of make sure that you're locked in position when you bench, you're locked in position when you deadlift, and you're locked in position when you squat. So engaging the lats, engaging the upper back is going to help keep a neutral spine, keep good shoulder position, good shoulder health. So those are going to be the key areas that we're going to work on over the next several videos. So just a little bit of intro so you get some context on why we're doing these drills. And then the last piece is obviously just working on our skill. So we're working on the skill of squatting, the skill of benching, the skill of deadlifting. So we're going to do drills that help kind of teach certain positions and ingrain patterns in certain positions in those lifts. So we're going to work on correcting common faults. Common faults in the squat are knees coming in. Common faults in the bench press is the elbows coming out and the scapula protracting too much. In a deadlift, shoulders kind of coming forward, knees knocking in. So being able to hold a neutral spine position, being able to have a good relationship with our hips and knees, so good knee tracking, and just making sure the shoulder blades stay in a good position. So those are going to be the areas that we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on, and each warm-up sequence is going to be specific for the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. If you guys want more information on creating like a custom warm-up for you, we also offer consultations and coaching. You guys can check out the links below. Thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for our Meathead Monday tip.